So Randy, we've met for coffee this morning, and you've been talking to me, and I just wanted to get this down on videotape to share with the world. And what you've been talking about is the realization that so many people, especially in cities, don't have a clue about how to grow any of their own food.
Yeah.
And you have ideas, and you've been putting in place some systems with other people to help change that. And I'd like for you to talk to us about what you've done and what your ideas are and what seems to be working and where it's going.
Right. Well, we thank you, and I'm happy to share this because all around the world people are trying to figure out how to address this kind of food crisis that we are all facing, that has emerged out of our industrial food systems and our fast food systems and the kinds of ways that we grow and produce, process and distribute and consume food over the last few decades, which has changed so much, almost more in the last half century than it has in 10,000 years, really. And part of what's happened is a kind of huge de-skilling among people, where we've lost a connection to how to grow food, how to process it, how to cook it, and what it means to eat different kinds of food and the impacts that it has on our bodies. And we've outsourced in our systems all of that knowledge to food companies, to food corporations. And what we've really discovered is that there's a huge negative impact, and we see that with our diabetes crisis, our obesity crisis, and a growing hunger and poverty, really, within our food systems and sectors across our society, whether it's health sector or education or government, are realizing if that we don't figure a way out how to intervene in this, we're going to bankrupt ourselves, because while we're producing a lot of cheap food, our health bills are becoming more and more and more, not to mention the personal sorrow that people experience with these health problems that are created from the way that we grow our food. And so all around the world, all around the United States, people are trying to figure out ways of how do you help change this food system. And a big piece of it is, how do you reskill people? How do you help people regain a relationship to food and the natural world that allows them to feel confident that they can take charge again in terms of relearning what it means to grow food, what it means to process food, and what it means to cook.
And so how are you going to do that?
Well, I mean, I think we, I think we have to think in a systemic way. We have to, there's so much to do. There's so many problems that are connected with our food system that I think we have to think about the whole system and identify the places in that system that have the biggest effects, not only immediately, but that sort of carry out over a long time and ramp up. And it took maybe several decades for us to get in the quandary with our food that we are today, and it's probably going to take decades to get ourselves out. And so we have to invest with our energies and our resources in places in our food system that are going to have big changes down the line. And I think that's why working with our young people is so crucial, figuring out how to help young people reconnect with what food is and what growing food is. And so one of the things that we've been doing here in Duluth is working with young people, both at the university, as you mentioned. We have launched something called the Sustainable Ag Project, Sustainable Agriculture Project at the University of Minnesota Duluth, which is basically creating a small farm that can expose college students to the experiential dimensions of growing food, working with our dining services to learn how to reintegrate whole foods and begin the change that they can make in terms of procuring food from area farmers that can then build a kind of economic base for expanding our local foods production. But we're also working with a larger sort of set of relationships to think through how do we help our schools and how do we help younger kids relearn these skills. And the Duluth Public School Systems has been working with a project where they're creating school gardens at each of the elementary schools. And there's 2 of them presently, and there's 9 public schools, elementary schools, and we have created a kind of partnership called the Tomato Man project, named because of a man who was growing tomato plants for school children who recently passed away. But the project is really about how do you create a coalition that can help schools reskill young children in food and gardening and so forth. And that coalition is really integrating people from the Duluth Public School System, the Duluth Community Garden Program, and the university through the Sustainable Egg Project. And it's thinking about how do you create a system, an interlinked set of resources that can not only create a structure that allows these children to be exposed to the experiential dimensions of relearning what it means to grow food and process food and eat whole foods, but also create a system that can be sustained over time within community. And so the Duluth Community Garden Program in Duluth here is a very robust organization which has been around for 30-some years, creating the possibilities for people to grow food at local levels and have community gardens. And so they are partnering with the public school systems to help create the knowledge base and the skill sets and the resources for the public schools, the elementary schools, to create these school gardens and integrate them into the community, into the parents as well as the students themselves, to make sure that these places last over time. It can be embedded in community. And the Sustainable Agriculture Project at the university is in the process of creating a model teacher training garden that will assist in this process by in a sense creating an average school garden and putting it at our farm place on the university and using that to train teachers, which then will be exposed to the basics of how do you garden, how do you think about integrating curriculum into teaching children, how these skills that we all have to regain. How do you use math and history and science and so forth to do the things that school children need to learn, but also do that within the context of learning these skills. It's not an either-or situation. It's not like we either have gardening or we have math. It's figuring out a way where all of these things can be integrated, and teachers who are going through their training process can relearn themselves how to garden, so that when they show up at a school that is doing this, they don't have to learn from the school kids themselves, which they will inevitably, because as a teacher we all learn more from our students almost than anybody else, but you also need to have a baseline set of skills that you can help lead those children. And so if we can create this school garden program where we have a teacher training garden at the university that is linked with the public school system, that's linked with the community garden program, we create an interlinked system that will stand the best chance, I think, of working well, but also being sustained over time. because everybody will then share the responsibilities, they'll share the resources, and will share the passion that's required to move this forward.
That is fabulous. Randy, can people contact you if they want some
Sure.
guidance on the curriculum or how it's done or anything? Can you...
Sure. Well, there's
Or
a lot
other
of
people?
resources out there, and we could certainly help do that. If you Googled the Sustainable Agriculture Project at the University of Minnesota Duluth, you could find our website.
I'll put some links on the end of this video as
Great.
well for people.
Sure. And I would also encourage people to look up the Duluth Community Garden Program, which is, again, a kind of model program for how do you create opportunities for people of all incomes, of all classes, of all backgrounds to relearn these skill sets and play an important role in helping other organizations like universities, like the public schools, to regain the skills that the Community Garden Program has really kept alive during the so-called dark ages of our food skills over the last 20, 30, 40 years.
So we're in a Renaissance period.
I think we are. I think we've got a long Renaissance period ahead of us, and it's going to be a lot of work, but it's also, what more fun is it than to go outside and pick your own vegetables and fruit and eat them? So it's not all work, it's a lot of play.
Thank you, Randy.
Yep, thank you.